that doesn't create happiness. It creates more uncertain ground.
The problem is like we're putting a ton of energy and effort into becoming happier. We're just doing it wrong.
You'll transform the way you feel starting today.
You mentioned gratitude, and gratitude has come up on the show before, but what I loved about your take on it was, if I remember the chapter rightly, you said, gratitude is a daily practice. That's the easy part. I want you to be grateful in every aspect of your life. And I love that. And I've been sitting with that idea for the last week or so. What if you could expand on it, Jay?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm really glad you're asking me about gratitude. Before we do that, though, you sparked another thought. Do you mind if I kind of go back, if you're okay with it?
Go where you want to go, man.
You're sparking so many great thoughts in my mind. I can't ignore them. This is you're such a great interview. It's so much fun. Like, I really feel like we've gone in so many directions that I didn't even plan. So thank you so much. But when you were talking about the stories we tell ourselves, I think that's so important because there's a great study that I talk about in the book by Amy Wrzniewski from the Yale University. And what they found is that they tried to find a career that they felt people may find not sharing a positive story around. And they found that hospital cleaners or hospital workers potentially have one of the toughest jobs. And Rangan, you're a doctor, and I'm sure you've seen people having to do that work, and it's a tough job. And so they asked hospital workers how they defined their jobs. And the majority of them defined it as low skilled, defined it as, insignificant, defined it as just a way to pay the bills, and that their job wasn't useful or their job wasn't important. And their role was basically described like the personnel manual. But then they asked another set of hospital workers, the same people who did the same jobs, different people who did the same jobs. And they said, how do you feel about your jobs? And these people had completely different views. They felt they were healers. They felt they were caretakers. They felt that they were able to transform the energy of the actual hospital. They felt that they were carers for the people there. And what they found is that these different people who did the same job were telling themselves a different story. And therefore they saw their role as integral to the healing of the patient. And because they saw their role as integral to the healing of the patient, they found the work that they did to be extremely meaningful. And that's crazy to think about it, that different people doing the same job could say different things about the same work. They're doing the same exact thing daily, but someone thinks it's meaningless and the other thinks it's so meaningful. And this was a term by Yale that was called job crafting. The ability to assign meaning where you see it, and all of a sudden your life becomes meaningful. So if you're sitting in a job right now that you hate, or if you've got a boss that you really don't like, or if you're in a relationship that you don't want to be in, if you can't leave for whatever reason right now because of COVID or lockdown or whatever it is, financial difficulties, if you can't leave and you really want to, one of the things I recommend you do is called job crafting from the Yale School of Management. So you start asking yourself, where can I find meaning in this? What can I learn? What can I adopt? What is this trying to teach me? And that's actually where gratitude can be applied to every place, because you start going, there is some value in this. I remember when I wanted to leave my corporate job and I wanted to live my passion and do what I do today. But I'm so grateful I was at my corporate job because I learned so much there that is so useful to me now. And we find it very easy to be grateful when things are going our way, but we find it very difficult to be grateful when things are not going our way. But what we have to learn to realize, which is a really hard lesson to realize, is that things are always going your way if you're moving in the right direction. Things are not going to always look like they're going your way, and they could still be going your way. We've all seen curses turn into gifts and gifts turn into curses. But the problem is, and this is the challenge, we have a projector up here of what we want life to look like. And then we have the reality of what life actually looks like. So there's this big discrepancy. And so sometimes you're actually going in the right direction, but because it doesn't look like your picture and your image of what it should look like, you work less, you become lazier, you become complacent, you try less harder because you're like, this doesn't look like the right direction. But you'll get to where you want in life, just not in the way you imagined it, if you keep going, if you keep pushing, if you keep learning. And that's what it means to be grateful in all areas of your life, is trying to, even in the toughest moment, even in a challenging situation, not gratitude like, oh, I'm so thankful to you for causing me the pain. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is saying to yourself, where is there meaning in this? Where is the lesson in this so I don't repeat this again? If I can be grateful in this challenging situation and I can experience gratitude at all times, then I'm always going to be coming at things from a positive space and positive energy.
Yeah, so powerful, Jay. Would you recommend people start off with a particular daily practice as a way of getting good and developing the skill before they can start applying it, let's say, to aspects of their life that maybe aren't going as well as they want to, where they have to reframe things? I mean, what has been your experience in trying to teach people about gratitude and how they should start that process?
Yeah, so you always develop your muscles in the training center and in the gym. You don't go out and develop your muscles on game day, right? Like no one gets thrown out onto the pitch and says, oh yeah, go and play a World Cup final and you'll figure out how strong you are. You would never do that. You train in the gym, you prepare, you get ready, and then you go. You don't go, I want to learn how to run. Maybe I should run in the marathon next year, right? That's not how it works. And so Rangan's absolutely right that it starts in small bouts. So I want to get more practical because me and Rangan have spoken about a lot of concepts today. When we talk about practicing thankfulness or gratitude, and I talk about 4 habits in the book, one of the key daily habits or daily practices is thankfulness. Now, thankfulness isn't just about feeling. Thankfulness isn't just about thinking. It's actually about expressing. So when Rangan messaged me a few weeks back and he told me that he'd been reading my book, I sent him an early copy because he was going to interview me on the podcast, and he sent me that message. I was so grateful to him, like genuinely, because he was expressing gratitude to me. And that's the amazing thing. Instead of just feeling gratitude, let's say Rangan felt it, but he didn't say it to me. If he didn't say it to me, he would have not had the experience, A, of sharing it, B, of receiving my gratitude back to him and our relationship deepening based on that simple message he sent me. And so gratitude becomes more powerful when you express it daily. So every day ask yourself, who's a person that you want to express gratitude to and go and tell them? Secondly, what's a place that you're grateful for and spend more time in that place? And what's a project that you're grateful for in your life? And if you write these down every single day before you go to bed, who's a person I'm grateful for and why? What's a place that I'm grateful for and why? And right now, it may not be a place you can go to. It may be a place that you visited and you're so grateful you got to go there before COVID. And the third thing is a project in your life. And so when you express gratitude, make sure that it's specific. So I'll give you an example. Let's say Rangan throws a party with his wife this weekend at their home and their friends come over. And one of his friends, Rangan, give me 2 friends' names in your life and we'll pick on them for a bit.
Okay. I'll say Jeremy.
Jeremy.
I know he'll be listening.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll go Gareth.
Okay,
my buddy,
Gareth and Jeremy. Gareth,
Yeah.
So let's say Gareth and Jeremy, and again, I'm just going to add a disclaimer. None of this reflects Gareth and Jeremy in real life. But let's say Gareth and Jeremy come to this party that Rangan and his wife throw, and it's just, just a gathering to get people together. The next morning, Rangan wakes up. He doesn't look at his first thing in the morning, his phone. That's not what Rangan does. Rangan looks at his phone about 3 hours later, after he's exercised, meditated, spent time with his kids. And then he looks at his phone, and he sees these 2 messages from Gareth and Jeremy. Gareth, sorry about this, but here we go. So Gareth has messaged him saying, thanks, mate. It was great, right? That was Gareth's message. And Jeremy's message was, Rangan, thank you so much. Like, you and your wife just threw an amazing party, and I loved all the games we played. Your kids are adorable. And, oh, by the way, you know that food? How did you both make that? The food was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting us have this moment together. So those are 2 messages. A or B, which one do you think causes Rangan more joy? Now, Rangan's a grateful person, so he'll be grateful to both of them. But he's more likely, and honestly, all of us are, going to be more grateful to Jeremy in that scenario because he's gone into more depth and been specific about what he actually liked and learned. And because of that, he is now going to attract more love and gratitude back from Rangan as well. So that's why expressing gratitude is actually the key. And if we can express gratitude to people, places, and projects, we start to develop more gratitude in our life. And that's something we can do daily. And it can be an email, it can be a voice note, it can be a text, it could be a video call, but it can be as simple as just a text message. But specific gratitude is scientifically shown to be better for you and better for the other person.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, thanks so much for sharing that, because gratitude gets spoken about a lot these days, but I think that specificity piece, I think that example beautifully demonstrates I can feel it, the difference. You can feel it viscerally as you hear it. It does something different. And I remember so clearly, I think I left you a WhatsApp voice message because I was thinking, he's probably asleep now, but he won't have his phone on at night. There's that bit of insecurity at first. And I thought, no, just express the damn gratitude. I think the Rangan of a few years ago possibly wouldn't have done it out of insecurity, or will this be taken the right way or the wrong way or whatever. But I would say the person I am today, having done a lot of the work and having practiced a lot of these tools, there is some, if not only as you're sharing, does it feel good for you to get it, but it feels nice to share it. I'm doing a lot of voice notes these days. I'm finding I'm going into WhatsApp, pressing the mic. In fact, someone told me during lockdown that you can actually press it and flip it up, which is my friend Jody. Thanks, Jody. I didn't know you could do that, because then you can talk without actually holding it.
I didn't know that either. I hold it down. Thank you, Jody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's actually Jeremy's wife. So it's all coming. It's bringing it back together for those guys. But I find it's really. So I'm a vocal kind of person. I like talking, and sometimes I find it hard to express what I want to on a text message. So I'll just do a WhatsApp voice message. And I think gratitude is super powerful. One thing I'm going to add, well, I'll ask you actually, do you do your gratitude practice by yourself, or do you also do it with your wife?
So I do my gratitude practice by myself, but then the expression may lead to me expressing it to my wife if she's the person that day that I'm being grateful for. And now I'm probably grateful to my wife every day. And so I express gratitude to her every day. But I really find spending some time by myself to figure out my mind first. It's almost like if you're both trying to solve a problem together, you can help each other, but one person can sometimes take shortcuts because the other person kind of carries the weight. And it's really important to really be clear about who you're grateful for. You can do it with your partner, of course, but make sure one of you are not kind of relying on the other person to come up with all the answers and do all the hard work, when it really needs to be a personal feeling. So, for me, I feel gratitude is the easiest gift you can give someone, and the easiest gift for someone to receive, especially when it's genuine and specific. And Rangan, I would encourage you, not just with me, but with anyone, it was so genuine and specific that, I recommend you continue to do that. Sharing of gratitude, as you saw, and you said it's visceral. It is. It boosts your mood when you're grateful to someone in a specific way, and then you feel their love back.
Do you feel, or do you think, as I do, that many people have got hang-ups and insecurities, and therefore to do what I did, to actually express gratitude to someone, they're fearful about doing it?
Yeah.
Because insecurity is, I think we all face insecurities, right?
Yeah.
And how would you help someone who says, hey, Jay, look, I want to do that. Like, I'd love to tell my work colleague that, she was so helpful to me yesterday and she got me out of this jam and helped me do something. But what, will it come across wrong? I don't really know. What will they think? I mean, what would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I think you are right. I think some of our insecurity comes from, sometimes our insecurity can come from our ego, which is blocking our gratitude. So the ego says, well, I don't want to recognize that someone else is doing something good because it makes me feel inferior. That's one of the ways that our ego can block us from gratitude. And I believe in some traditions and in some circles, I've heard ego being translated to eliminate gratitude out, right? It's like eliminate ego. So, you can kind of lose gratitude through ego because you think, if I tell them that they're good, then that means I'm not good, which is not true at all. The other way the insecurity comes in gratitude is like, what if they think I'm just trying to like get close to them, or I'm just trying to say something nice for the sake of it, or I'm just lying or pretending. Like, what if they think I'm just trying to suck up to them, right? Like, is that the reason? And so sometimes we hold back how we feel. What I'd say to you is, I'd say that expressing gratitude if genuine, if from the heart, and if well explained and thought out, should always be shared even when you feel uncomfortable. Because when it's shared from that place, you've already got the benefits of feeling grateful. And then if that person does or doesn't react in the way you expect them to, and by the way, there shouldn't be a need for them to react because you're just thanking them for what they've already done. You're not thanking them for what they're about to do. You're thanking them for what they've already done. So now if they respond in an ungrateful way, you haven't lost your gratitude because you're grateful for what they did in the past, not what they did in the future. So don't then go, oh, well, they didn't even deserve me to be grateful, because they did for that moment of what they did for you. So share it because it's good for you. Don't worry about how they respond.
Yeah. And I guess also if they do respond in that way, or if they do think that, that's their own issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, completely.
That's not your issue. That you've expressed it from your heart. How they react is kind of out of your control, right? And that's another key learning, I think, on this path to thinking like a monk, I would guess, is, you're not in control of other people's thoughts, right?
Not at all. And that's, that's the biggest lesson, is that you're not in charge of the results, how people respond, or what they think. You never are. So wasting your time trying to change how someone thinks of you can actually be one of the most worthless pursuits in life. But changing how you think about yourself is probably one of the most worthwhile pursuits in life, but the one we spend less time on. We're constantly trying to change how people think about us, and we think if they think highly of us, then we'll feel better about ourselves. But that's not the case. The case is we can change how we feel about ourselves by changing our behavior and being more in aligned with the person we want to be, with our values, as Rangan said, going back full circle. So don't get lost in trying to change other people's perceptions of you, because that could be a never-ending journey, and a journey that you never reach the destination of, because you never will truly be able to control it.
Yeah. It comes full circle back to that Cooley quote, right? Yeah. I mean, it is such a powerful quote, because everything we talk about, you can then just back it up straight into that, and again, it brings out the meaning of that quote so much more. Yeah. But Jay, when you were just talking there about the insecurity that some people may feel when trying to express gratitude, I was struck by something I wrote down from your book, and I can't remember which chapter it's in, but you say it's impossible to build one's own happiness on the unhappiness of others. Yeah,
so I'm quoting Daisaku Ikeda, who's a Buddhist philosopher, who says that statement. I can't remember which chapter. I think I start the negativity chapter with that quote. So it's Daisaku Ikeda, Buddhist philosopher, and he says exactly that you can't build your own happiness on the unhappiness of others. And I think what that truly means is we often believe that we can only be superior if someone else is inferior. So we feel better when we say, oh, that person, did you know that couple's getting a divorce? Oh, did you know their marriage only lasted like 2 years? And what you're really saying is, well, we've somehow managed to stay together for 8 years. Like, we've done pretty all right, right? And you're kind of gossiping about them. Or another way it goes is like, oh, did you hear about him? He's totally messed it up. Like, he's getting fired next week. And all you're doing is you're making someone feel inferior to make yourself feel superior. That doesn't create happiness. It creates more uncertain ground, because now you're constantly looking for someone else to feel inferior for you to feel superior. And guess what? God forbid someone's now outperforming you. You're now feeling inferior, and you're feeling all the insecurity of what you felt about someone else. So it's never a stable ground, right? I believe it's in the Bible, but you can't, I think it's that you can't build your home on shifting sands. But in the same way, you can't build a stable identity of yourself on the gossip or the mistakes of others. And so you've got to be really careful about not building a ground for yourself. Imagine the ground you're standing on is built on blocks of superiority, bricks of gossip, and mud and cement of criticism. That's not going to hold. And so you don't want to create your joy because other people are struggling or suffering. You want to create your joy because you know how to deal with struggle and suffering.
Yeah. So beautifully explained. And I think we often write the quotes down that really mean a lot to us. And I certainly feel for me, that was something I spent a lot of my adult life really trying to come to terms with and realizing, I used to be so competitive, if I won a game of snooker or table tennis or, it would literally elevate me. And if I lost, man, I would be down in the dumps. Like it would, and I've really explored this, and given the time we've got left, I sort of probably can't go down this rabbit hole. But I know one component is that as a kid, how I did at school, and again, I don't know if this was the same in your household. I know a lot of immigrant families have this sort of mentality. If you got 98%, it's like, well, why was it not 100%?
Yeah, for sure.
You were like, oh, what? You came second in that test. Why? What happened? Who was first? Why didn't you come first?
Yes.
And I actually think, whilst and my mum will say, because I've spoken to her about this recently, she said, well, I knew you were capable, so I wanted you to be the best you could. And okay, and I think she was doing the best she could. I would say for me, the way I interpreted it was that I can only be loved. I can only be feel good about myself when I'm number one. Mm-hmm. And really, I'd say over the last sort of 5 years, that's pretty much almost gone from me now. I'm pretty okay with it now. Like I don't feel, and I think that is, I think it's such an important quote that you've shared, because I sort of think now, and we should probably talk about social media a bit, because you're pretty much the king of social media in so many ways. And I think I'd love to know some of your thoughts on social media. But with respect to that quote, I think one of the negatives, and there've no doubt been a lot of positives of social media, you have shared such amazing wisdom in your videos to millions of people around the world, which potentially may not have happened without social media, right? So it's not about saying it's either good or bad. But I do think for some people, it can magnify those insecurities. So if you feel that you can build your happiness on the unhappiness of others, people can get very focused on follow accounts and likes. And I certainly know in the UK medic world, there's a lot of medics feel a pressure to be building up their profiles and have contacted me saying, I'm not sure what to do. And you think, wow, it's causing such discontentment. And it's just a metric that in so many levels, I'm not going to say it's meaningless. Of course, it's not meaningless. But if you're trying to do it because how you'll be perceived by others, going back to what we've been talking about throughout this conversation, what are you posting for? What are you hoping to achieve by posting it? Is it in service? Is it to help people? Or is it to elevate yourself? Yeah. I don't know, maybe you can untangle that some for us, because I'm sure some people listening will be thinking that.
Yeah, there's very few creators of content on social media that started out with a follow account in mind. So me included, a lot of my peers in this space, a lot of people that I know that are extremely successful on different platforms, none of them started, at least the ones that I know, none of them started to get followers. They all started because they had something to share, whatever that was, whether it was comedy, whether it was wisdom, whether it was a workout plan, a fitness plan, whatever it was, like they had something that they did that they were passionate about, they wanted to share. And I can only speak to myself fully, but when I started, I thought I was going to have a full-time corporate job and I was going to make videos on the evenings and weekends to share a message. That's genuinely all I believed. And after my first month, I had about 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, about 4 videos I'd made on YouTube. I had about 1,000 people that had subscribed to my channel. And most of my friends were like, great, Jay, that's where it's going to end. Like, congrats, well done. Like, you got 1,000 subscribers. You kind of just crept in there in 30 days. Like, well done, that's cool. Like, how far is this going to go? And that's really the reality of what it felt like. And the interesting thing is, the question was never, how do I get more followers? The question was always, how do I make more content that impacts people? Because, and that's the question with everything. It's like, if you make more content that genuinely impacts people, you'll get more followers. If you build a business that serves more people, you'll make more money. If you help a lot of people through your talents and gifts, you will be famous and known for it. Like it's a byproduct of doing something properly. And that's why I love the definition that Peter Diamandis gives, that we should redefine the word billionaire to be someone who impacts the lives of 1 billion people. Why is Jeff Bezos the richest man in the world? Because he's created a product that we all say we want and that it solves a problem that we really need. And so if you want to get followers, don't look at the number. Ask yourself, are you really creating the value that's going to help people? And they're going to naturally want to follow you. And they're going to want to love your work and share it. Because to me, that's the worthwhile pursuit in life. Because when you do that work is humbling. When you do that creativity, that's the part that makes you grateful for the success that you get, because you go, wow, like people actually care about what I have to say. But if you're just obsessed about numbers and metrics without being obsessed by the content, the creation, and the service, then you'll never be satisfied, because there'll always be someone better than you. So for me, when I set out to write this book, so many people are like, oh, so do you want this book to be a bestseller? And I said, I want this book to be a bestseller. Of course I do. But I'm not going to focus on it being a bestseller. I'm going to focus on writing the best book in the world that I can possibly write, given the skills that I have. And that's why when I talk about Dharma in the book, which is helping everyone find their purpose, Dharma is broken down. Dharma means purpose loosely, and has many different meanings, but one of them is nature and purpose, your true nature. And the 3 aspects that I'll share now and there's more depth in the book, the 3 aspects of Dharma are your passion, your skills, and your compassion. That's what it means. When you have your passion plus your skills plus your compassion, that equals purpose. But for most of us, if we're just looking at numbers and metrics and data, I mean, you'll be dissatisfied that. And I'm saying that as someone who really values numbers. I understand the value of followers, social media. I get the value of all those things, and I'm highly strategic. But I'll be completely honest with you. I'm not focused on the number. I'm focused on making content. And that's the message, that if we're focused on really creating value in the world, all of the other stuff will come naturally. You don't have to go out and separately try and get it. And, Rangan, you've done a great job of this. You've made content that's very organic to you. You've made content that's very natural to you. And I think that's what people gravitate towards you and your podcast and your books, because it's you being yourself. You're not trying to sound like someone else. You're not trying to be someone else. And if you look at the most successful creators in the world, they're all like that. They've just really shared their raw personality with others.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that, Jay. And I will just add to that. As I have stripped away the layers of conditioning from my childhood and the insecurities, and frankly used a lot of the tools that are in your book, but there's a lot of new ones in there for me to be applying, which I'm really grateful that you've written this book. So I think it is incredible, and I will sit with a lot of these, as I already am. But as I have become more me, and I post, frankly, I'm like you, like many people, I'm a busy guy. I've got 2 young kids. I made a decision that my spending time with my children, spending undistracted time with my family is more important to me than other things. People have heard me say before, I don't tend to, let's say, Insta story that much or when I'm at home, because my kids are around. And for me, it doesn't fit with my values to model to them that every aspect of my life needs to be documented into a screen. Now, that is absolutely not a criticism of people who do that. It genuinely isn't. It's just not the way I choose to do things. But really, what I was trying to say is that I think what you said about your focus on making content that changes people's lives. And of course, then people are going to share it because you're giving people something of value. And I found not only, particularly with this podcast, which is probably the favorite thing of all the things that I do now, is I get to be myself. I get to talk with amazing people like you. We get to have honest conversations that really, often there's no real agenda. It's just about trying to share your insight, my insight, just have these sort of conversations. And I feel I have become a happier and more content person since I started doing my podcast because it's helped me be myself. It's exhausting trying to be someone else. Do you know what I mean? It's tiring trying to be someone else. And going back to what you said at the start, if people are trying to spend their lives living someone else's life, it's knackering.
It's so tiring. It's so tiring. It's, I think, I'm sure it's been stated before around how it's so hard trying to act like someone else and so much easier. It's less effort being yourself.
Yeah.
But that's what you said, that our childhood has made us believe we're not enough. And so we think we have to be what's rewarded in society. And actually, we're now living at a time where what's being rewarded in society is being yourself. And that authenticity. And you're right. It's not about whether someone's posting 30 stories a day or not. That's not what it's about. It's about, is that authentically the life they want to live? That's the question. The question isn't, do you make videos or have a podcast or have millions of followers? The question is that authentic to who you are and what you're really trying to do in the world? Because, by the way, I know people who've impacted the world who have 0 followers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I know people who've impacted the world who have no videos or content. That's not the only way to impact the world. That is a way to impact the world. And that's a way that I had to pursue, and Rangan's pursued in a different way in his life. And if you look at Rangan's journey and my journey, we're doing it in different ways. There's no sameness in how it's being done because everyone has that. So don't limit yourself to believe there's only one way to getting to where you want to go. There are multiple paths, and you probably have to test and experiment and take a few of them to see which one actually comes to fruition. And I took many paths. I tried so many things before I tried social media that social media was the only option I had left. And so for me, social media wasn't even my first choice. Social media was my last choice of how to work. But I was getting no breakthroughs from media companies and media execs and content platforms. I got no love from it all. So I had to turn to social media.
Wow. Just so powerful, so incredible, Jay. I mean, Jay, look, I had so many things to talk to you about, relationships and about service and about, the 4 C's of friendship, which again is expanding a vocabulary for people to be able to understand their lives better, understand their friends better, get less frustrated. But I'll let people buy the book and read the book to learn those tools. And maybe at some point in the future, we can revisit this for a part 2. Maybe next time you're actually allowed to travel, you're in the UK, we'll get you in the studio. We'll do it face to face. But Jay, this podcast is called Feel Better, Live More. And that's because when we feel better in ourselves, we get more out of our life. Now, you shared some wonderful insights and practical tips for people in the show today. I'd always like to leave people with a few practical things that they can think about introducing into their life immediately to change the quality of their lives, to change the way they feel. You have so many tips. I know it's a tricky question, but do you have 3 or 4 sort of closing tips, words of wisdom for people to really start changing things immediately? Yeah.
So I'm going to share with everyone what's been the biggest thing. It's in the book, but I'll go into in depth now. It's the 3 biggest things that have changed my experience of COVID. And I've expressed this and shared this with so many companies that I've been doing private coaching with or my own clients. And these 3 things have really changed a lot of how they feel. And there are 3 really easy things you can do starting today or tomorrow. So you don't need a lot to make them happen. So they're called the 3 S's: the sights, the sense, and the sound. So what we see, what we hear, and what we smell has a huge impact on how we feel. And we actually underestimate our senses because we rely so much on our eyes. I'll give you an example. Everyone's been wearing masks recently, right? Like everyone's been wearing a mask recently. How many of you struggle to understand what people are saying because you can't read their lips anymore?
Yeah.
Right? We're so used to looking at people's lips as they talk that we know what words they're saying. Now that we can't see their lips, we realize we're actually not that great listeners. And our ears are almost asleep, so we rely so much on our eyes. So let me explain to you what you can change. Let's talk about sights, what you see. Ask yourself right now, what's the first thing you see in the morning? What's the first thing? 80% of people, they see their phone first thing in the morning and last thing in the night. After they see their partner and before they see them in the morning. 80% of us. change it. I want you to see something in the morning that fills you with joy. It could be your favorite quote. It could be your favorite teaching. It could be a picture that your kids drew that you absolutely love. It could be a photo of your family. It could be a work of art that inspires you. I surround myself in my studio with pictures of places I've lived, people that I'm inspired by, stories that I've told, because it fills my mind with energy when I walk into this room. If I walked in and saw a blank white wall, of course I'm going to go, this is way more interesting. But my wall's more interesting than this to me because it's meaningful. And so the first thing you see in the morning, don't make it something reactive. Don't make it a message or an email. Make it something that you've chosen to inspire you. That's the first thing. The second thing is the sense in your life. Why is it that when you walk into a spa or you get a massage, you feel relaxed? It's because they have sandalwood, lavender, and eucalyptus just spraying out of diffusers and candles. And it's an instant way of feeling calm. If you just inhale on your inward breath for a count of 4 and exhale for a count of 4, if you just inhale eucalyptus, lavender, sandalwood, whatever scent you like from a diffuser or a candle, you will feel a natural sense of calm in your life and feel that clarity that you need to drop out of that anxious feeling you may have. And you can have a different scent in your living room, a different scent in your bedroom, a different scent in your kitchen, one that feels right for the energy you want in that room. And the third and final one is sound. So many of us don't realize the power of sound, but whether you're listening to your favorite song or whether you listen to nature sounds, when we were monks, we would rise to nature sounds. And we found that the sound of nature is so at pace with the body and the mind. And when I lived in New York, I'd often feel exhausted mentally. And I'd wonder why. I exercise, I meditate. Why is it that I feel that way? And I realized because it's of something when I researched called cognitive load. Your brain is making sense of insignificant sounds of drilling, of construction work, of cars and taxis and horns. And so your brain doesn't have the power to deal with what's actually it's trying to focus on. So ask yourself, what are the sounds in the background of your life? Are they songs that bring you to life? Are they music that calm you down before you go to bed? Use sights, scents, and sounds to change the state and energy of any environment in your home. And if you literally walked into every room in your house and you said, what is the sight that inspires me in this room? What is the scent that calms me in this room? And what is the sound that makes me feel at ease in this room? And use sound design, sight design, and scent design each of your rooms with just a candle, a picture, and a playlist. You'll transform the way you feel starting today.
This is a theme which I've heard you speak about before, that our intuitions over what makes us happy are often wrong. I wonder if you'd mind expanding on a few examples.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think, one of the dumbest features of the human mind, right? Like, it'd just be nice if our brain was like pointing us towards the things that were really going to make us happy, if we went after the stuff that we were really going to like. But the data suggests that that's just not the case. There are all these domains where we think, if I could only get X, then I would be happy. But then we get that X and it just doesn't work. And so, we just talked about money as an example. Material possessions are another one. Many of us think, oh, if I could just get that beach house or that new car, or even just, at a local level, I'm just going to buy these new shoes. They'll make me happy. The data suggests that, yeah, it makes you happy for a split second, but then it's not really a happiness that seems to last. It doesn't kind of give you lasting happiness. It doesn't even give you happiness that lasts for as long as we think. And so there's all these ways where we think that changing our circumstances is going to boost happiness, but in fact, it just doesn't work. The flip side, though, is there's all these different interventions we can do to boost our happiness. I imagine we'll talk more about them, but simple things like taking time for social connection, like experiencing more gratitude, like being present, exercising, sleeping more, like those things have a huge impact on our happiness, but we just don't have motivations to seek them out, right? Like we tend not to realize, hey, that's the thing you need to go for. At least we don't realize it as much as we go for the money and the success and the accolades and those things. And those should be the things that we're focused on. So this is a problem. I sometimes joke with my students that our minds lie to us about happiness. And I think it's almost like the way our minds lie in these other contexts. Like if you're looking at, one of these visual illusions that go around on the internet, right? You see it one way and it's really strong intuition you have, but actually the way that what will really matter for your happiness might look like the opposite, might look like just something that doesn't fit with your intuitions. And that's bad because it means we're systematically going after stuff to improve our happiness. happiness, that's not going to work. It'd be one thing if we just weren't working at it. If we're just like, oh, I'll just see what happens. Maybe I'll get happy. The problem is like, we're putting a ton of energy and effort into becoming happier. We're just doing it wrong.
So fascinating. And definitely we're going to get into what are these interventions? What are the practical things we can do to increase that feeling of happiness inside all of us? Before we do that, though, I'm really interested on a personal note that, as you said, you study animals, and you came across this predicament of unhappy students that you felt that you wanted to help them, and so you turn your attention to this course. What was the name of the course again?
On campus, we called it Psychology and the Good Life, mostly because I kind of wanted it to like pop from the course catalog, like, oh, the good life, like for students to know.
And what's it called? Because it's gone out on Coursera now, hasn't it? That anyone around the world can access it.
Yeah. The one on Coursera is known as The Science of Wellbeing. I'm not totally sure why we switched the names, but I think we wanted to just get well-being in the title so people would kind of know more what it was about.
Yeah, and there's some incredible number of people who've done that course now, I think, from last thing I read.
Yeah, it's been a little surreal, to be honest. When we first put the class online, hundreds of thousands of people signed up pretty quickly, which was sort of shocking. But then when the pandemic rolled around, like right around March of 2020, we had this enormous increase in the number of people who signed up. So just the first couple months of the pandemic, over 3 million people signed up to take the class, which was incredible. But again, I think it kind of made me, as a scientist, sort of feel really kind of excited about my fellow man, right? I mean, I think it was like people wanted to figure out how to really get through these tough times, and they didn't want platitudes. They wanted some evidence-based approaches, approaches that come from science. And I think, maybe that was sort of part and parcel of the pandemic. As we are dealing with COVID-19, I think people wanted real solutions, right? Like, what's really an evidence-based way I can protect myself against this virus? Like, wash my hands, wear masks, and so on. I think people wanted to do the same thing, not just to protect their physical health during this time, but to protect their mental health. And I think people didn't have obvious strategies to do so. And I think they saw the class as providing those. And that's why so many people flocked to it, once times got tough.
On a personal level, as someone who is sought after around the world now to speak about happiness, I'm interested in your own happiness levels and the sort of things that you learned as you were teaching that maybe you weren't applying, but that through teaching, through accumulating the evidence, you've started to bring into your life.
Yeah, well, so many things. I mean, I admit that, I was very worried about my students when I just thought about designing the class. I was seeing their depression and their anxiety and stuff. But one of the things is I was also seeing myself a little bit in them. I was watching, like, how's the week going? Like, oh, I can't wait to get to Friday. Like, I could experience that was a bad sentiment, that there was something deeply sad about that. But I also resonated with it. Like, yeah, me too. If I can only get to Friday, or even just things like feeling anxious and depressed, right? I wasn't necessarily clinically depressed or clinically anxious, but, I saw all that stuff in myself too. All the bad strategies I watched my students doing, every error I saw my students making when it came to their happiness, I could see seeds of that in myself too. And so one of the reasons I was excited to teach the class was to figure out those strategies for myself too. I also realized that if I was going to be this happiness professor, I had to practice what I preached, right? It's like if you're a medical doctor, you can't go off and be unhealthy and eat cheeseburgers all the time and stuff like. You got to kind of toe the line so that people know that expertise is real, that you're kind of not selling snake oil. And so what it meant was that now I really needed to kind of follow the things I was telling my students. And again, the research shows if you engage in these practices, you get happier. Like I use the kind of standard empirical survey measures of happiness. On every single one, my happiness has gone up, at least 1 to 2 points on a 10-point scale. And it's not like magic. It's just because I'm doing the stuff now that really does improve happiness.
Well, let's go through what really matters when it comes to happiness. Are there some universal practices that really you can say, without knowing an individual's circumstances, you can say with a high degree of certainty that if you do this, you are likely to improve your well-being score and your happiness?
Yeah, I mean, we know this now. We know lots of these practices for exactly that, for with the idea that these are things that won't just help a few people, but that really pretty much universally are going to help if you engage with them the right way. And it's worth noting kind of where we get this evidence from. I mean, the evidence starts because positive psychologists go out and they really study happy people. You find them like they're out there, in the UK and London and New Haven, like, you can find these folks. And then researchers try to ask, like, what are these folks doing differently? Like, how do they behave differently? Do they spend their time differently? And then you get some hints about behaviors that might be working for improving happiness. And then the next step is that you do an intervention. You bring in the not so happy folks. You make them do the behavior that the happy people are doing. And then you measure whether happiness goes up. And in lots of cases, we have examples of, kinds of behaviors that we know really, really works. And so one of the biggest behaviors that works super well for improving well-being is social connection. One of the most famous papers in positive psychology by the psychologists Marty Seligman and Ed Diener say that social connection and feeling socially connected is a necessary condition for very high happiness. You just simply don't find highly happy people who don't also feel socially connected. But we also know from the intervention work that improving your social connection, making new social connections, even talking to strangers, like on a train in sort of pre-COVID days, like talking to strangers on your commute, can actually boost up your well-being in ways we really, really don't expect. And these types of effects hold across personality variables, so you get the same sorts of boosts of happiness for social connection for introverts and for extroverts. It seems to work in ways we don't expect. And I think this is one of the reasons we're all struggling so much during COVID, is that, insidiously, one of the problems of COVID is that we have to sort of socially distance. And that means that some of us aren't engaging in social connection in the way we used to. Even in subtle ways, many of us are working from home, so we don't get the kind of office cooler, chat that we get with our coworkers. But we also don't see people like in simple ways. Many of us are, doing a curbside pickup where we go to restaurants, grab something, off the side of the curb, or get our groceries dropped off at our door. Like the simple kinds of interactions we have with, the grocery store teller or the person who works at the coffee shop, like we're reducing those kind of simple connections too. And even those weak ties, the research show, matter for happiness. I think one of the reasons we're all kind of feeling it right now is that we need to build in a lot of that social connection that we've lost. And we need to do it more intentionally because it's not happening as naturally as it used to.
Yeah, one of the striking things that I've heard from patients and people who I interact with on social media is how many people regarded themselves as introverts. And they thought, I like being by myself. But a few weeks into these physical distancing measures, they realize, I do like being by myself, but I sometimes like to sit in a coffee shop with my laptop and my headphones in, and I kind of know there's other humans around, or I might just pick up a coffee. And a lot of introverts or people who would regard themselves as introverts think, I'm really, really missing that, the background buzz of other humans, which I think really speaks to what you were just saying there, that all these little, these small interactions that we possibly took for granted, either getting the train to work, saying hi to the ticket office attendant, showing your ticket to the conductor on the train, and all those little things, as we get stuck in our homes, on our screens, there's a huge part of how we've evolved as humans for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years that has frankly just been removed from us. And the impact, I think, is pretty worrying.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at the statistics of things like depression, anxiety, loneliness during COVID, many of these are skyrocketing. And I think, one of the culprits is just that we're losing out on these simple, weak tie social interactions, the chat with the barista at the coffee shop. Those things we forget really kind of build up our happiness. I think this is another big misconception we have about happiness, is we think of happiness as sort of a destination. You get there and you're sort of happily ever after, but that's not the right metaphor for happiness. Happiness is more like a leaky tire, right? It's going to kind of go flat a little bit, but then, you chat with the barista at the coffee shop, and that, kind of makes you feel a little good. And then you go about your day and, chat with someone else or have another joyous moment. We kind of can use these moments of joy to sort of boost up our happiness over time. And a lot of those moments were social moments, and we're missing them now.
What does the research say about talking to strangers and talking to people we don't know? Because I think there's some quite nice research there, isn't there, showing us just how impactful those interactions are.
Yeah, and just how wrong we get, just how wrong we are about those interactions. This is another domain where at least my intuition is that, yeah, maybe it'll make me feel okay, but it's not a major force in our happiness. In fact, if you plot me on a train, going to work in the morning, maybe I'd talk to somebody, but usually I'd put my headphones on and listen to a podcast, or get some work done, or try to get through some email. And it turns out that this is a mistake when it comes to maximizing your happiness. There's some lovely work by the University of Chicago psychologist Nick Epley, who did direct studies on this, where this is again back pre-COVID times, where he found some subjects who were about to do their daily commute on a train. He did this on the L trains in Chicago, and he said, okay, you want to be in a study, you'll get a Starbucks gift card, and people all sign up because Starbucks gift cards are the engine of all social science research. He's like, oh my God, Starbucks gift card. And so what he tells subjects is either for the rest of the train ride, don't talk to anybody. Please try to enjoy your solitude. Or for the rest of the train ride, just do what you normally do. It's kind of the control condition. Or for the rest of the train ride, I want you to try to make a meaningful social connection with somebody. Like talk to someone and don't just talk about the weather. Like really try to get to know them. What do people predict? Because he has one group of subjects predict ahead of time, which is going to make people feel happy. And people predict that the enjoy your solitude condition is going to feel awesome, right? They predict that that's going to maximize their happiness. And they don't just predict that the social connection condition is going to feel neutral. They predict that it's going to actively suck, that it's going to take them down from baseline. And what Nick finds is just the opposite. It's that solitude condition that feels yucky. The social connection condition makes you feel great. And I think this is a problem, right? This is another domain where we have these bad intuitions about what makes us happy. And what's worse is it doesn't just affect our behavior. It changes the structures that we create. I'm sure, in the UK, they have, quiet cars on trains and things like that. Nick's evidence suggests that that's not necessarily a way to maximize passenger experience, right? We would maybe be better off with like a chatty car where you go on the car and everyone's like talking and interacting and getting to know one another. But, those are not the systems we build in because we have these incorrect theories about what's going to make us feel good.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how much we're influenced by the people around us. Because as you were describing that on the L trains, I think in Chicago, you said, it made me think about a few years ago. So I live in the north of England. I don't know how much time you spent in the UK, but there are certain typical kind of sayings about people in the north compared to people in the south. They're not all completely accurate. They're just going to lay that out there straight at the top of this. But a few years ago, I started going down to London quite regularly for work. And, I'm sure you've been to London before. I remember one of the first times where I went on the tube, this was a few years back, and I'd get on the underground, and I can't remember it exactly, but the guy sitting next to me, I was just like, "Hey mate, how you doing? How's things going?" And the guy looked at me as though I don't know, like I was about to attack him or I was a freak, like really. And I very quickly learned that, oh, you don't do that on the tube. On the tube, you get on, you mind your own business, you put your headphones on, you stay out of everyone's way. And within a few visits of going down to London, my behavior started to change to the point where I would just go on, put my headphones on. And I guess I'm naturally very extroverted, so I will always chat to people. But it's quite interesting that, isn't it, how we're saying that makes us happier, yet often things around us in society. And I wonder how much technology plays in here, because now we can put our headphones on and we can have all these incredible podcasts and playlists in our pockets, which are probably more attractive to us in the short term than chatting to any other human being. So yeah, just a few sort of thoughts there in terms of our environment. And that's something I guess you must see in the research as well, that our environment influences our happiness and how we behave.
Definitely. And I think, a lot of the things in our environment, we assume are designed to make us happier. We assume all these technologies are there, to make us happy. And I mean, we both have podcasts where happy podcast technology exists and people can listen to us. I hope my podcast is making people happy, but it's also worth recognizing that there's an opportunity cost, right? If you're listening to your podcast instead of talking to your family at dinner, that might not be even necessarily the best way to boost your well-being. And this is the kind of thing I see all the time with technology with my students. One of the most striking things for me, kind of taking this job where I'm a head of college on campus, was sort of seeing how students interact with each other in their kind of natural environment. The one I think about the most is like the dining hall, right? Like when I went to college, I remember the dining hall as being like the loudest place on the planet, because everybody's eating and talking, and it's just like, like just tons and tons of voices and stories being shared and laughter and things. What was striking when I took on this new role is if you go to a college dining hall right now, I mean, there's some talking and things, but it's much quieter than I remember it. And it's much quieter than I remember it because everyone's sitting around the dining hall with these, headphones that you and I are wearing to talk to each other around, with a screen out, either their phone and so on. And the students think they're being social. They're probably scrolling through their Instagram feed or using one of these weird new social media apps to kind of talk to one another, but they're not physically talking to one another in the way that primates are used to. And I think it's in part because, the technology is easier. I remember what it was like to be a new college student and to walk to the dining hall for the first time with your tray and you have to like talk to somebody. There's like an awkward startup cost with that. And I think technology just gives us an easy way to kind of do something else, right? Not going to avoid that anxiety, but it means because we don't ever get over the startup costs, we never develop these kind of weak ties with people where we just chat and get that little enjoyment. It means my college students are less likely to make these close friendships. It's one of the reasons that nationally in the US right now, 60% of college students report being very lonely most of the time, and I think it's in part because, the easiest thing to do is to flop on your headphones and not talk to someone. But that means you're missing out on all these good moments where you can experience joy through social connection.
Technology worries me, if I'm honest.
Me too. Me too a lot.
I think particularly as my kids now are 10 and 8, and I feel that my ability to influence, particularly my son, is probably starts to become less and less. And again, I'm not trying to control him or anything. I'm just conscious of what is normal now in society. I'm also aware of how these apps, how technology is designed. And I think there's an illusion of choice that we think. I talk to a lot of teachers say, we believe in giving kids choice. But I don't think it is choice. I don't think it's this real... I think it's the illusion of choice. I don't think many adults can resist. I certainly don't think kids can resist. And I really feel that we are sleepwalking into major problems. And it's really hard because you end up sounding a bit like a Luddite and not sort of moving on with the world. But I don't think it's like all technology is bad. I just feel that we don't intentionally use technology. We're using it to do everything rather than thinking, well, what's good about technology? Like this conversation, brilliant. I can see you. It's not the same as being in the room, but it's a pretty close, comparison. But I just feel I worry. I mean, what do you think about technology? And is there any research to support what I guess we're both trying to say?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's something I worry about a lot, both in my own life and kind of watching my own behavior and reaction to technology and all the notifications and cues and the little dopamine reward hits that we get from technology. Also from watching my students, right, who I know are lonelier than they've ever been in college history, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with, ironically, has to do with technology, right? Like these devices that they're using to connect are actually leading them to not form connections in real life. And so I think this is something that we really need to understand better, right? And it's hard to do great science on this because all of us have technology, right? It's hard to get a control condition with somebody who's never like had a smartphone or social media because they might not be neurotypical, like, in the way you would want a control group to be. But I think it's important to recognize that part of the problem of technology isn't the thing we normally think, right? When we have these worries about technology, we instantly point to social media, like social media is the bad guy. But actually, it's just the technology and its excitement in and of itself that might be a problem. On my podcast, The Happiness Lab, I interview my colleague Liz Dunn, who's a professor at UBC and studies the impact that technology has on happiness. And she kind of has this wonderful metaphor. She says, imagine if instead of like, to a restaurant at dinner, instead of bringing my cell phone, I brought this big wheelbarrow. And in the wheelbarrow, I had a printout of every email I've ever had since 1997. Like photo albums on top of photo albums of me and my vacations, my husband, and like stuff I've eaten. I had videos, like all these DVDs of like cats and porn, and like and a printout of every tweet that every US president has sent in the last couple weeks. Piles and piles of newspapers that go back many, many years, right? Like recipes. Like if I brought a wheelbarrow filled with like DVDs and printouts and photos and all that stuff, it'd be really hard to sit at dinner and just have a normal conversation with my husband at that restaurant, because I'd want to be peeking through like, oh, let's look at this cat video, honey, or like like, oh, porn, like that seems interesting, right? Like it'd be really hard to ignore that. And the idea is that like your brain knows that on the other side of your phone is all that stuff. Like your brain's not stupid. It recognizes where there's rewarding stuff. And it means that every kind of normal conversation we want to have in real life is in some sense competing with those other stimuli. We have that wheelbarrow and it's in our pocket all the time. It's in our kids' pockets all the time as they go to school, as they try to have dinner with us and so on. And I think we haven't, even when we're not using our phones, we don't necessarily recognize the hit that they're taking on our attention and on our motivation. And that's the kind of thing that Liz Dunn studies. She looks not necessarily at how much you're not paying attention when you're using your phone, but also the mere act of having your phone around. What does that do to your attention and your social connection? She has this lovely study where she has people sitting in a waiting room, and they can either have their phones out with them or not, right? Their phones are away in another room. And what she finds is that people smile 30% less when they just have their phones present. And I think, this makes sense, right? Like if you got your phone there, you're just going to be tempted to look at it. It's kind of drawing your attention. You're just naturally less inclined to look at the people around you. And if you multiply that 30% effect by, say walking around on the tube in London, or just like walking around any major city and everyone has these phones, what is that doing to our social connection? I think we simply don't understand the magnitude that we're kind of getting our attention stolen by these devices.
Yeah, it's insidious. And I think it's an experiment that I don't think any one of us has consciously signed up for. I feel sometimes when I talk about these things that you're going up in the face of the direction that society is going, and I think that makes it really challenging. I know you talk about when the phone's not there. Some of my happiest moments recently are when I've lost my phone, or it's been in my car. I left it on my mum's house and I thought, screw it, I'll get it tomorrow. And just, there's this lightness around because...
Yeah, you're noticing, you're like trees, like the sun, or just like people, I smell like people. No, it's really profound. I think, one of the ways to deal with it, because it's not going away, right? Yeah. This stuff is going to stick around. We just need better strategies to engage with our technology in more intentional ways. And one of my favorite pieces of advice comes from the journalist Catherine Price. She has this lovely book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, where she doesn't really advise you to break up with your phone, but just to develop a more mindful relationship with it. And she has this acronym that she uses called WWW. Whenever you pick up your phone, think WWW, which stands for what for, why now, and what else, right? What did I pick this up for? Was I going to do something with it? I was going to check my email, or I was going to look at the weather, or was I just like bored or anxious, or, like something like what was happening, right? And then why now, right? Like what was the emotion that caused you to do it? Was it just like, rote and you're just kind of anxiously picking it up? Or was it really like to do something at that moment, or is there something else you could be doing at that moment? And that gets to the sort of what else, which is like, what's the opportunity cost? Even if you're bored and you're going to pick up your phone to like, play a game or check your email, like what else could you be doing during that time that might make you happier? And the what else is often a social what else. When I'm picking up my phone, it's often like I could, go into the room to talk to my husband and check in how he's doing, right? I could look up at the sky. I could take a mindful breath, right? What are you missing out on by using your phone? And that has kind of caused me, using that sort of WWW strategy myself, it's made me realize a lot like why I pick up my phone, which is often out of like boredom and anxiety. But also sometimes when it's like useful, there's times I need to check my email or look at the weather or something. It's when it's kind of not mindful or not intentional, and it's just kind of yanking my attention. And when there's a real opportunity cost on other sorts of social interactions, even with the weather app, sometimes I've been like, I could just walk to the window and take a little walk around the block and look at the clouds and get a sense of probably what's going to happen, right?
It's funny you say those little micro moments where you could look up at the sky or have a little conversation with one of your flatmates or one of your family. I bet that time adds up. In that moment, we might think, oh, that's just a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there. But if you look at your phone, and some of the stats on how many times we look at our phone are really quite worrying. But let's say you look at your phone 40 times in the day, and let's say each time that's 2 minutes that you could have been doing something else. Well, that's 80 minutes potentially. That's nearly an hour and a half of your time. And again, I think the question, as you say, is intentionality. If it's there for a good reason that you've actually thought about, then fine. The worrying thing for me, I guess, and the sort of idea I've been playing with for about 6 or 9 months now, I spoke to Arianna Huffington about it recently when she came on the podcast. And I guess it's quite similar to what your friend Liz was saying. It's that I don't think another human being can compete with our device. I think it is decimating so many of our relationships with our children, with our partners. And I don't think we realize just it. You know, I know what it's like. If I've got my phone and my wife's got a phone in the evening, we could easily be satisfied ourselves in our own little customized world. And these algorithms know exactly what I want to see, how many times my eye has stared at it, how long I've stayed on for it, and it will keep feeding me things. I'm like, oh yeah, this looks interesting. This looks interesting. So, you know, one step is to try and make some rules around it. I think another nice approach, which I'm playing around with, is which apps do I really want on my phone? So when you take off the social media apps and actually just only use them on my laptop, my usage goes dramatically down. And, you know, do you have any more strategies around that you think or you've seen can help people with respect to their happiness?
Yeah, I think these kinds of strategies are like classic ones, right? I mean, what you described about taking your apps off is something behavioral scientists call situation modification, right? You change the situation so it's a little bit harder to access your apps or even to access your phone. You know, I know Ariana has like talked about having a little phone bed that she uses that I have in my bedroom. I have an Ariana phone bed, so I put my phone to bed before I go to bed, and then that means it's just on the other side of the room, right? It's not there to kind of pick up whenever I have this moment of like, oh, I'm bored or I can't fall asleep or something. So kind of getting rid of the technology in your phone, like the apps that are definitely like you don't have a great relationship with, like those go off the phone and just like use them on your laptop. Get the physical structure of the phone away so it becomes a little bit harder. And then I think these rules that you develop with your family are really important. I think one of the crises that we have with this technology is it came around so fast we didn't have time to develop norms about it. We have norms about like when you talk and when you don't talk and like who you can interact with, and we have these kinds of social norms that help us navigate things that would be tempting to do but that would be kind of a little bit gauche, right? Like if dinner comes, you wait for everybody to get theirs before you start. You might be tempted to eat it right then, but we kind of have this norm. I think we need the same thing with our phones. We just haven't had time as a society to develop those. Our norms around tempting things like food have come about over thousands of years of cultural evolution. The phone in its most tempting form, which I think of as a sort of iPhone smartphone, like that's new, right? Like that's like what, 2007, 2009, like that's when everybody started getting these things. It's like barely a decade old, right? And so I think that we just kind of need new norms to kind of help us figure out how to navigate this stuff. And so I think you can, it's hard to do that for society, but you can definitely do that in your own families. You can do that in your own flats. You can do that with your friend group. So make some explicit norms, like, at dinner, like who pulls their phone out. I've had friends who have a thing of like the first person to pull their phone out at a friend dinner at a restaurant, you have to pick up the tab, right? If you're the one who's like, oh, let me check on the, Google or something, like you have to pick up the tab because you're kind of ruining the moment. As soon as you pull your phone out, everyone else wants to. So I think these kinds of strategies are really helpful, but an internal strategy you could use is just to kind of pay attention to how your phone makes you feel. When you go on that social media binge or that gaming binge where you're kind of playing that silly app game or whatever, how do you feel afterwards? Even set yourself up a timer so it dings and ask, did that feel good? Are you feeling apathetic? Are you feeling connected? And often when you notice, actually, I kind of feel crappy. What did I just do with that hour? That noticing can really help you sort of update your own preferences. And this actually gets to another, we talked about how your mind lies to you. And this is one of the dumb features of the mind. Another dumb feature of the mind, and specifically a dumb feature of the brain, is that we have these systems that control what we want in life, what we go after, what we crave, what we're motivated to do. And you would like to think that those systems are hooked up to what we actually like, what we actually find rewarding and enjoy when we get it. But it turns out those systems aren't really hooked up, right? In fact, if you look in the brain, they're actually separate circuits. And they're separate circuits, which means that you can want all this stuff, you can kind of crave it and have a motivation for it and all this stuff. But then when you get it, you don't really like it very much. The classic case of this is a case of addiction, right? If you're a heroin addict, you will have incredible craving for the drug, you'll steal from your family, you'll do everything you can to get it. But then when you finally get a hit, your reward areas aren't firing as much as they would for a non-addict because you're habituated to the drug. You don't even like it very much, right? And I think that we see these little signs of that phenomena of addiction in so many of our behaviors. There's so many times when I'm tempted to go on Reddit and just scroll through. And my brain's like, one more page, there'll be something cool on the next page. And a half hour goes by. And if I ask myself, did I like that? I was so motivated to do it. And it sucked. I didn't like it at all. I felt kind of yucky and apathetic. And then there's the flip side of all these things I actually really do like. When I get a great yoga session in, that feels awesome. When I put the time in to set up a schedule to talk to a friend on the phone and we have this really great connection, that feels great. But I don't have the same motivation and craving I do to pick up my phone and check my email, right? And so this disconnect between wanting and liking, I think, is a huge problem. It means we're going to naturally have these motivations to go after stuff with incredible force and incredible automaticity. And when we do it, it's not going to affect our liking. And it means we don't have brain systems that are telling us to go after the stuff that really will feel good. We have to do that kind of for ourselves intentionally. It takes work.
Yeah, it's motivation, but I guess in some ways it's also easier to pick up that phone, right? To talk to your friends and have that meaningful, raw, authentic interaction. You're going to get more out of it, but you probably have to put a bit more in as well to get that reward. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this conversation, there's loads more like it on my channel. Please do press subscribe and hit that bell. Now, back to the conversation.
I've realised as I've grown up, I think maybe when I was younger, I was probably more selfish and not very optimistic and a little bit pessimistic. But now I've just trained myself to be positive and be optimistic in every situation. And that's something you can really learn to do. And it feels so good when you realise you can be positive. You can live your life not moaning about things and actually taking control. Because when you do that, when you realise you can react differently and you can see things positively, life is better and you can be so much happier. So I don't know where it came from, but it's definitely something that's inside of me. And I love spreading that message. I love trying to encourage other people to live that way. Whether it's through meditation or exercise, whatever it may be, you can choose to live a healthier, happier life if you start making the right decisions, I think.
You said there, Joe, that when you realize you can react differently, that is really powerful, mate, because that's been one of the biggest learnings for me in my journey into adulthood and as a parent is just that. It's when there's that space between the stressor and our response. There is a space, and in that space, we can choose what we do. It may be hard sometimes, but we can choose. And it's like a revelation when you sort of get that and go, I could react like that. I used to react like that, but now I'm going to choose to react differently.
Definitely. I think it's amazing when you realize, like you said about when your kids are stressing you out, there's a moment where you can fight or flight or react, or you can actually have a moment to breathe. And when you start to become more patient and train that muscle, you actually can really react so well. Because my default reaction as a kid, as a child, my mum and dad would shout and scream and shout and slam doors. I really, in my head, I kind of do slam doors and I do scream and shout. I'm doing that when Indy and Marley are screaming at me, but I've processed that and kind of learned to take a breath, and then I can really react differently. So I don't need to shout and scream, but you are a product of your childhood. You know, you are what you've been exposed to. So although in my head I'm screaming, I've learned to really stay calm, not all the time, but as many times as I can. And it's just that thing, isn't it? It's powerful. When you realise you can react differently to stress, you can actually live a much more chilled life and be way happier for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned, Joe, how your childhood has, like all of us, our childhood influences the people we end up becoming. And you've mentioned already in this conversation that your dad struggled with addiction at various parts of his life. I'm wondering, what is the biggest lesson do you feel that your dad has taught you?
I think just the fact that addiction is such a complex situation. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really know what's going on or what's caused it. But, you know, I understand my dad now. I know more about his childhood. I know that, you know, his old man left him and went off and had another family in Canada. And so all these things would have affected him, and he got into drugs quite young, you know. And I really kind of think that experience, seeing how destructive drugs were for my dad and my family, really steered me clear of it. You know, when my friends were down the park smoking cigarettes and maybe getting some weed, I would be going to play football, or I'd be going down, going to do something active and physical and playing or whatever. So I made some decisions at an early age because I was so frightened. I was actually frightened that if I did it, I would love it and I'd do harder drugs and I'd be an alcoholic and a drug addict. So it was quite a fearful thing, I think, you know, because my dad was clean, then he was in rehab, then he was out, then he'd relapse. It was so up and down, and it was so upsetting that I didn't want to go down that path. So I think, you know, just my dad's experience with drugs really shaped me as an adult, and I'm proud of that. And I don't look back, and this is the thing about a lot of people with addiction in the family are quite ashamed of it. They don't want to talk about their alcoholic mum or their drug addict father, but, you know, it's okay to talk about it. It's part of your story, and you shouldn't be ashamed of your past. Like, my relationship with my dad's great today, and I love him, and he's been through a lot, and I'm actually just proud that he survived heroin addiction. It's not an easy thing. A lot of his friends ended up dead, you know, they really did.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. And what you mentioned a couple of times in this conversation, compassion. And I don't know if you know the work of Gabor Mate or not.
Did you have him on your podcast? He's amazing. That really opened up my heart a little bit as well, because it's that thing of, I was an angry teenager. I didn't want to accept my dad's addiction, and I was angry. But then I now look at addiction differently. Like, one of the things he says is the antidote to addiction is connection. And like, what a beautiful thought, you know, rather than get angry and throw your dad out of the house and say, I don't love you, I can't be around you, you know, go off on your own. By bringing your dad closer and giving him a hug and saying, I love you, it's all, you know, we're all good. That's connection. That's what he needs. So yeah, it's little things like that, tiny phrases, podcasts I've listened to have opened up my heart. Also, I've done some really deep meditations on gratitude, and that's powerful. Like, when you start to actually think positively about things, you realize that life's just all these experiences, and you've got to be grateful for everything, you know, and you can learn from it. But yeah, I love Gabor Mate.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love what you just said, Joe, and you're right, that these little phrases can just change our perspective in an instant. You suddenly get something that's been sitting with you for years, and you just look at it in a slightly different way. I know one phrase which has changed my life over the past year or two is something that Peter Crone said to me on one of my podcasts. It's basically this idea that if you were that person, you'd be doing exactly the same as them. And I would sit with that, Joe. I would just sit in my bed, lie in bed at night thinking about it. If you were that person, and I think about it a lot, because it's basically saying that if you were that other person with their upbringing, with their family structure, with their beliefs, with their schooling, with what they think is normal in the world, you'd have the same opinion as them. And it's how I often approach now any toxicity on social media, or any sort of pushback or really charged comments, which I don't really get much of, to be fair, anymore. But I look at it like you, with a place of compassion, and go, oh, you know, obviously that's their worldview. They see it that way. They've interpreted this in that way. So that's certainly a phrase for me that's changed things. And would you say that phrase from Gabor has changed the way you interact with your dad?
Definitely. It was just a beautiful thought that, you know, we often, like, because addiction's so painful, and when someone you love is taking drugs or whatever it is, gambling or drinking, it's painful, right? And you just want to shut the door in their face and you want to push them away. But that's disconnection. And addicts, especially drug addicts, they're taking drugs to take away some kind of pain or trauma that he may have experienced. So for me to think, when my dad's having his, lows, because he suffers with depression, he has ups and downs, I text him, I ring him, or I pull him towards me, I connect with him to get him through it. I say, come over and see Indy and Marley, and that's something that I may not have done when I was a teenager. I didn't have it in me to do that as a teenager, but now as an adult, I see the signs, and I know that if I hadn't spoke to him for a few days, I know he's having a rough time, and then he might be starting to think about maybe not going to NA meetings and dropping out of the fellowship and stuff. So he needs his meetings, and he needs his connection to his children and his family. So yeah, it is a lovely quote, and I really think about it a lot, and I try and spread that one to anyone that's going through that. Because I think people are ashamed of having like parents of addiction, but you shouldn't be. You should be able to talk about it and be open with it. There's loads of people in this world with parents with some form of addiction. You're not on your own.
Yeah, I think hearing you talk about it is going to be so powerful, Joe, for so many people, because I think you're right. People don't feel they can talk about it. They are ashamed. They lock it down. And it's that stuff that you lock down inside that manifests in so many other behaviors and stress and anxiety. Whereas, being open and honest, and I appreciate some people, it can be challenging, but it's so important. And I really, I sort of pay homage to you for actually talking about it, because I think you then pave the way for people who look up to you to also talk about it in their own lives. I mean, that's your dad, what he's taught you. What do you feel that your mum has taught you?
My mum is one of the most wonderful, loving, compassionate people. I think about this a lot. Where does my love and nurturing kind of nature come from? And my giving. I love giving. So I love helping and being there for people. And I said my mum left school at 15, so she was on benefits, pretty much right up until my teenage years, on social, and we didn't have a lot of dough or anything. But then once we got into high school, something in her said, I want to go and do something. I want to be more. I don't want to be on benefits for my life. So she went to a young a women's college to get some education, and then went on to do a foundation degree at Nescott College in Epsom, and she became a social worker. So of all the things she could have done, she could have gone and be an accountant, or she could have done, bookkeeping, or I don't know, anything in any industry. But she chose to be a social worker and go and help the people that she wants to help, people that have been through similar stuff to her, childhood trauma, getting kicked out of home, all kinds of things, So, and that really highlights, I think, where my love comes from, where my ability to want to help people, it's there, it's there. It's in, and she showed me that. And one thing I'll say about my childhood is that my mum and dad always said, and my mum used to say it all the time, Joe, I love you, whatever you want to be, whether you're a dustman or a doctor, I'll love you just the same. And that's such an important message when you're a kid, because I didn't have any pressure to be anything or anyone. I just was going to be who I wanted to be. And that was a lovely message. And I say it to Indy now. It's like, whatever you want to be, darling, when you're older, I'm going to be so proud of you, as long as you're happy. And that's really what my mum and dad have said to me from a very young age, even when I was like a 7-8-year-old boy.
Yeah, powerful. So, Joe, that's something your parents did for you that you now make sure you are doing for your kids. Is there anything that I guess happened in your childhood that you think, actually, you know what, my parents were doing their best, but actually I want to do things differently with my kids?
One of the best things happened the other day, I picked Indy up from nursery, and her nursery teacher said that she's just so loving and kind. Like Indy said, a little boy started nursery, and Indy was holding his hand and making sure he was safe. And she says, I love you. And, she's really affectionate. And that love and that affection comes from me and Rosie. So it is amazing how much they become, they're their own person from the start, but your nurture and how you take care of them, how you show them love and patience really spreads. And really, so by being like that with Indy, I know that, and also by loving Rosie, really loving and being patient and kind of, really respectful of Rosie, means that Indy will expect that from her husband when she's older, and it will have a knock-on effect to her kids. And so I am always trying my hardest to be a nice, polite and respectful and also patient parent, because I was shouted at, like I said, doors were slammed. We lived in council houses with really thin doors, and there'd always be holes in the doors, and I never knew what it was, but it's because my dad would punch through the door when they were arguing and stuff. So there's all these things that, without a doubt, I know that I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to have a door in my house with holes in it, or slam a door because I don't want us to be frightened or upset or scared by, that being around us. So yeah, without a doubt, all of these childhood experiences have affected and shaped my my opinion of parenthood and what I want to be with Indy and Marley.
You're also very close to your brother, and I'm wondering what lessons has your brother taught you that play out in your everyday life?
So I've got two brothers. I've got an older one called Nicky, who is a year older than me, and I've got a 10-year-old brother called George, we're all from the same mum and dad. And so there's a big gap. And when George came along, I was 10 and he was brand new, and I loved him. I had him he slept in my bed for years. I taught him how to ride. Like, he was like my best friend. I just wanted to teach him everything. And we had such a great relationship. So I was changing nappies at 10 years old, and I was feeding him and doing bath time. So I definitely think I got to be responsible and how to look after a baby through George. And then with my older brother, Nicky, like, he's taught me, he's so ambitious. He works with me. So he kind of does all my content. He helps with my decisions, and he's got such a great strategy, such a great vision for me and how we do things and how we help people. And so I talk about the MBA. I was like, it's really both of us, because he was there through every single PE with Joe worker in my ear, doing the shout outs. So I think Nicky's taught me how to be patient and how to be how to think about other people's feelings. Well, like, we have 15 members of staff, and so through Nicky and through seeing him interact with other people, it's taught me to be more patient and more open to other people's ideas. It's not just about me. Like, it's a team of people. We all have ideas, and Nicky's taught me that, to be more collaborative, I think.
Yeah, I imagine that must have been there must be a sort of crux point when you're growing, you're doing your Instagram yourself, you're probably editing everything, putting it all online yourself, and then suddenly it probably gets to that point where it's too big to manage by yourself, and then there's people trying to help you and your brand, which is actually you. So it must be this kind of weird conflict of actually people are trying to help you in your business, but the name is Joe Wicks, so it's kind of you, but they're trying to help you be more you or get more of you out to the world. I don't know, is it kind of a weird sort of conflict at times?
Well, you might think that I've got this massive social media team, but when I talk about the 15 staff, they're like body coach support heroes. So they're like customer service. They look after clients on the plan, and they're amazing. The business wouldn't be what it is without them. They really help communicate and encourage the clients to stick to the plan. In terms of the social media, it's me, my brother Nicky, and my cousin Luca. So it's family, literally, it's like family. And then my best friend Dom does all my editing and uploads my videos. So there's only 4 of us. People think there's this massive team, but really it was just me in the start. Then Nicky came and worked for me. Then my little cousin Luca, and then my friend Dom. And together, I actually shoot all the content on my own. So I have a camera at home, I do the videos, I just upload it to WeTransfer, and then Dom will edit it and put it online. And Nicky will help with strategy around, like, we've got an idea for a video, or let's do this and visit this school and things like that. So it's a teamwork. And then Luca is kind of social media community manager, because I get so many DMs and there's so many questions and queries, but you'd be amazed at just how much of it is me. I send voice notes to people. I spend 3 or 4 hours a day doing voice notes to reply to people, because you can't replace that. You can't be me. You can sound like me. You can do a tweet maybe and say, it's the Body Coach team. But when someone gets a voice note back from me, that means so much to them. And it's so important that I stay connected to my audience for my own personal mental health and also my motivation. It really motivates me when I read DMs and I read the feedback from people.
Yeah. I mean, it's very touching to hear that, Joe, that you're still doing that. And I don't know how many messages you must get a day. You mentioned you try and spend 3 or 4 hours a day doing that. How has having kids affected your relationship with social media? Because I'm guessing the game you could play with social media must have been very different when it was just you or just you and Rosie compared to when it's now with the children as well. So, what does that look like now that you've got 2 young children?
Well, I watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and it completely ruined me. Like, it threw me, it rattled me, it upset me to realise how addicted I am and my usage, because I put out a lot of content and I reply to a lot of people, but I also consume a lot of nonsense, and I scroll and I think, why do I do it? And so I've put in some new boundaries into my life. Like, I don't take my phone to my bedroom anymore at night. I leave it downstairs. That has changed my life. I'm sleeping so much more and so much better for it. I also, I've really tried this probably like 5 or 6 days a week. Between the hours of 5 p.m. and 7:30, like when we do dinner and bath and bedtime, I don't have my phone on me, because I do get distracted. I do pick it up and I check a little thing here and there. So it's kind of like I'm clawing back the hours of my addiction to my device, right? I'm taking some back, and they all add up, and it does feel nice just to have that 2.5 hour slot where I'm not on my phone. And don't get me wrong, I'm running at 7:30 when they're in bed, I'm running to my phone and I'm going through it and I'm catching up on everything. But it's having those blocks of time that, you know, it's nice to just not be on your phone and be really present. But in terms of the sharing of the children, I went through this phase. So I had a weaning book, my Weaning 15 book. I set up a separate account, and I shared so much in the build up to that book, you know, videos of the babies when they're eating and recipes and videos, and it's so cute. But I almost got to a point where I just felt like I shared so much, and now I don't want to have the phone in their face at every single mealtime. So I'm definitely sharing less content. I'm making less recipes. I'm not sharing as many weaning recipes, and that it kind of my social media suffers, if you like. But I just don't want to be there every night with a phone in their face. I want to have them time to just relax and not think that daddy's filming them all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Joe, about 1.5 years ago, I think I heard you say somewhere that you don't think meditation is for you. You know, you sort of, it's not your thing or something like that. But then I know, and I've heard your chat with Russell, and it was brilliant. It was such a good listen. And he mentioned on that chat, didn't he, that he thought meditation was going to help you. Was that the trigger for you to try again? And what's happened since then?
So I tried like the Headspace app and the Calm app a couple of years back, you know, and it's like the 7-day challenge or whatever. And I did about 10 minutes of it, and I rang up my friend and said, look, I'm mindful that I cannot be mindful, and I'm fine with it. I want to be busy. I like being busy. I'm good. And then I did Russell Brand's podcast, Underneath the Skin, and he said to me, Joe, you sound like a man. Your brain sounds like a brain that needs meditation. And he was like, look, I'm going to send you a link. Go and give it a go. It's a 20-minute guided meditation on YouTube, completely free. I sat there and I did it, and I just felt so good. Like, I've never connected with my breath. I've done yoga before, but I've always struggled with the breathing and that kind of stuff. And it opened something up in my mind. It opened up this moment of space and like gratitude. And I said, I did an amazing, this is a true story. I did an amazing meditation on gratitude. And it said, think of something you're really grateful for. And all I could think about was my dad being alive. And I was thinking, why am I thinking that? Where's that thought come from? And I burst into tears because I realised how grateful I was that he didn't die. He didn't inject himself with heroin one day in his flat and die. And that was really powerful. And I had this really wonderful feeling. I've never had that thought. I've always just thought he was a victim. But I kept thinking, you're a survivor. I'm proud of you. Like, I'm so grateful you've survived this. I got off the meditation, like got out of the 20-minute meditation. I rang him up and I told him that. And I told him how proud I was of him, and like, what a weird thing to happen. That's never crossed my mind. But meditation brought me that calmness and that little bit of space in my head to think, you know, you can say this to your dad right now and you can mean it, and it could be wonderful. And it was just the most lovely conversation, and he was so happy that I reached out. And he's been trying to get me to meditate for years, my old man, because he's very much into yoga and meditation. So yeah, I've got to thank Russell Brand, the comedian and the great entrepreneur, Russell Brand.
And how are you meditating these days?
So I've got the Headspace app because I interviewed Andy Puddicombe for my podcast series. He's the founder of Headspace, and I've got the app, and I'm really into the sleepcast. So before bed, sometimes I'll listen to a sleepcast, and then I'll do a guided meditation in the morning. Sometimes I usually do sort of 15 minutes about 3 or 4 days a week. So I'm not 7 days a week, but that's enough for me. On the days I do it, I feel good, I feel calm. And I really like the different sort of, you know, you can do one on gratitude, one on letting go of negativity, one on dealing with stress. And I don't really have anxiety, but I do get a bit stressed over certain things. So it's amazing. And it's, for some people, it's like, oh, that's never for me. I can't be bothered. I can't do it. But you've got to be patient with it. You've got to kind of train yourself to do it. You get better at each time, I think.
For sure. If you are doing it, when would you do it in your day? Do you have to put it in a set time? Like for me, if I don't do it when I wake up, it rarely happens. And I'm just wondering for you, how do you fit it into your day? I'm
the same. Yeah, I like to do it in the morning. So I'll jump up, you know, I'll grab a glass of water and I'll go upstairs. I try and do it before the kids are awake. But it's good to actually learn to do it with other noises going on as well. But I've got these good I stick on my my sort of noise cancelling headphones, and I'll sit there on a cushion. Sometimes I do it laying down. I quite enjoy it laying down. And yeah, I just try and do it maybe like, I'll do like my stretching and my meditation. So I bolt it onto another habit. So I need to do my daily stretching because my hip's in bits. So I do a bit of stretching, bit of meditation, and that's it, done. But you're right, if I don't do it, and I go up to the gym and straight to exercise, or I go out to work. I just don't do it in the evening. I just can't seem to find the time because I'd rather be with the kids. I'd rather be doing something else. So I really think morning is a good time to meditate.
Yeah, it's interesting what we said about learning to do it with other people around, because I think when I first started, and I've had this sort of, I won't say battle, but, you know, I've often done meditation over various periods over the last few years because I know of all the benefits. I know in my logical mind there are benefits to doing this. I should do it. But, you know, I'd fall off the wagon again and I wouldn't do it for a few weeks. And I think in the last year, my relationship to meditation has really, really changed. So being able to do it when the kids are around, because I try and get up before them and I tiptoe down the stairs and I'm in the living room and I'm like, no, I want to have my time to do my meditation or have a little workout before they wake up. But my daughter often will hear, or my son will hear that daddy's up, and I'll creep down and say, my daughter once came and said, "Oh, daddy, you meditate. Can I meditate with you?" And I thought, yeah, why not? Why can't she just meditate with me? So actually, I think at the time I was using Calm. And so I think we just had it on and she sat with me and I did my meditation and she did hers. I thought, well, this is pretty cool, isn't it? Because then I'm kind of modeling the behavior that hopefully my kids will start doing. So it's interesting because before it would stress me out a bit. No, I want the time to myself because I want to be able to do my meditation and sort my head out. So that was really great. But also what's changed in me, and I'd be interested to see if we ever revisit this in a few years, how it's gone for you. But I used to use apps. And I think for a few months now, I now don't use anything. But it took me a while, Jay, to get here. And I'm at this point now where I actually don't want an app or a voice in my head anymore. Now, that may change, but at the moment, I can meditate in silence. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is what they always talk about. And maybe I needed the app to get me to that next stage. And I don't know how long this will last for, but I kind of feel that it's a journey, right? Meditation. I don't think we just sort of, a lot of people want to try it a couple of times, go, oh, it's not my thing. It's kind of like, well, if you had a monkey mind your entire life, we're not going to suddenly be able to just sit and listen to a 10-minute meditation. It's like if someone said, you got to run a marathon or, I don't know, do a 24-hour Children in Need challenge, right? It's, well, you're going to have to do something to prepare yourself in order to be able to do that. Do you know what I mean?
I'd love to get to that point where I don't need a Headspace app or guided meditation, because I don't want the device near me. I don't want headphones on me. I don't want my Apple Watch buzzing. I don't want the tech, but it is an amazing way. It's got me into meditation, so I love it. I really do love my Headspace app. But I would love to get to that point where I can just talk to myself and find my own mantra and my own breath and do it. That must be amazing, because you could then be on a beach somewhere, or you could be in a park or in your living room and just do it. You don't need anything. And I think that's probably what meditation is about. It's not really about listening to other people's voices, but I do find that some of the wording they use does bring out nice thoughts, and it makes me feel a bit more calm, and it's like a guided route to calmness, as opposed to like trying to work yourself up and get there yourself. But no, I'll give it a go. I should try it now.
Yeah, mate, see, look, it took me a few years to get to that point. So I'm not saying, and again, I don't want to sort of preach as if I have reached nirvana and I've sort of got this sorted. I'm on a journey. I'm trying to learn about myself every day. I'm trying to be a better dad, be a better husband, be a better human being, right? That's what drives me. But I know on the days I meditate, I'm a better dad. End of story. I don't react as much. That space between stimulus and response becomes bigger on the days I meditate. On the days I don't have time, or I tell myself I don't have time, that space sort of, it just contracts and it's like more reactive. Have you felt changes like that after meditating?
Yeah, on the days I meditate, I'm more productive and I get more done, but I just feel less stressed. Like if there's loads of things going on and like you look at your diary and I've got all these appointments, because sometimes things just jump in and I'm like, who put that in there? What's that? And I think I just don't want to do too many things today. Then it can get to me. But when I've meditated, I just sort of breathe it all. It kind of like just comes a lot easier. And I just sort of think that's going to be fine. It's only another half hour, or you've only got 2 appointments. It's not like, I just don't let the stress get to me as much. And stress is such a harsh thing because it puts you in such a bad mood and can really make you feel bad and drain your energy. And so the idea is to just feel as less stress as possible. And there are ways around it. And meditation, without a doubt, there's no way on earth meditation cannot be a benefit to every single human brain, because we're like a microprocessor, aren't we? We're processing so much data, I think meditation is that, like, it's almost slowing that process down and giving you a bit more, data in there, a bit more like space in your hard drive, and then you can go out towards the day and enjoy it a bit more.
Joe, I, like you, am passionate about kids and children's health, and seeing what you've done over the past few years when you've gone on the road, you've gone into schools, you've got people moving and smiling and singing and whatever else you've done. I'm really interested as to what have you learnt along that way? Have you learnt things from the kids? Have you adapted your approach because of what you've seen in the schools?
I really do love working with children. When I go into a school and I visit a school in any area, it could be a really affluent area, it could be a really deprived area, the same response is they're so engaged, they're so excited to move their bodies, and they're so excited to exercise. And so I do think my energy really is going into younger children. I think it's harder at teenage and secondary school because the habits are formed and they're a bit more resistant. Whereas the younger children, they're much more up for it. They really want to train, they really want to have fun. And I've learned that children are resilient. They're really, they really kind of use exercise, I think, as a great way of letting out that stress and venting. And if they've got rough, tough upbringings at home and rough backgrounds or wherever they may live, it is a great way of letting them feel safe and feel kind of connected through health and fitness. I think it's an amazing way of bringing kids out of their shell, if you like, giving them confidence. There's so many benefits to it, but it really is one. I've had success with adults and cookbooks, but for me now, I just love working with school kids. I love knowing that young kids are like going into their living room and choosing a YouTube workout and doing it on their own. Like, that's, for me, is the ultimate win, because it's like they're doing it off their own back. And I get a lot of messages from parents that say that my kid went upstairs with my laptop and I could hear banging. I thought they were rowing and they were doing one of your HIIT workouts. They were doing mountain climbers or running on the spot. And that's such a lovely message, because it's really what I'm trying to achieve. It's like independent desire to want to exercise for their own mental health.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Joe, if someone's listening to this right now, this conversation, or they're watching it on YouTube, and they're thinking, Joe, I get it. I've heard what you've got to say. I get it, that it's going to help me feel better. It's going to have benefits for my mental health. But, Joe, exercise is not for me. I was teased as a kid. I don't like going to gyms because I'm scared of what people are going to say. I'm not sure if I'm doing them the right way. I just don't think it's for me. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say, firstly, you're not alone. There's lots of people, there's millions of people that really find exercise difficult. It's in my DNA. I love it. From a kid, I've always loved it. But some kids love music and they became amazing guitarists and didn't get engaged in PE, or didn't have a great experience with bullying or with school teachers or whatever it may be. So don't ever feel like it's too late. You can find something that you love, and it doesn't have to be a body coach, HIIT workout, doing burpees, raising your heart rate and feeling really uncomfortable. You may be someone who, loves going for 5-mile walks with your dog. Like, that is exercise, and that is your mental health, and that is you doing what you love. So don't feel a pressure to conform to any type of fitness. You don't need a Peloton bike. You don't need a expensive personal trainer. There's always something. And I think really use tech. Turn to YouTube and see how many amazing trainers there are in terms of meditation, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, body weight stuff. Like, there's so many great trainers, and I almost feel like there's something for everyone on YouTube, and it's free. So maybe give that a go. Like, spend a week, say, right, today I'm going to do a 20-minute bar class. Tomorrow I'm going to do a Pilates workout or a yoga workout. And by the end of that week, you're going to go, I don't like any of Joe's workouts, but I love this yoga teacher from LA. I'm going to do that twice a week. So there's something there. It's just about trying it out, and don't feel like it has to be throwing heavy weights around and doing star jumps and mountain climbers, because it may not be for you, but you can still have a strong body. You can still have a supple, mobile body and still get the mental health benefits from that type of exercise.
Yeah. No, love it. Great advice to people. If you enjoyed that conversation, I think you are really going to enjoy one that I had with Esther Perel, all about relationships. It's right there, so give it a click and let me know what you think.
This notion sometimes that people have, that you have to know yourself first, you have to love yourself first, and then you can go and be in a relationship, never made sense to me.